So I wanted to, go and jump off something in New York, and I set my heart on jumping off the Empire State Building. So after a season of skydiving and teaching skydiving and doing it for fun as well as teaching is also, but I decided to go up to New York in April 1986 with a friend of mine who was a former officer with the South African military, guy called Alistair Boyd, great guy. And he was a skydiver. He wasn't that experienced as a skydiver, and certainly no base jumping. Yeah, so I took Alistair up this antenna, 1,500-foot antenna in Florida, and he launched himself off. He went off first because I was his coach, and he did this perfect spread eagle. But he's a big lad, and he went into this forward roll and did a complete 360, a complete front loop. And I thought, no, he's going to die. But he came back out face to earth and deployed his parachute, and it opened perfectly, and off he went. And so that was his first base jump. And he wasn't that an experienced skydiver and no base jumping experience. So then we went off to New York, and he was up for the adventure. And I picked the Empire State Building. It was the most iconic building in New York. This was, the Twin Towers were still alive and well at the time, but not as beautiful and as iconic as the Empire State Building. So I figured out a way how to do it, and you couldn't get parachutes into the elevator. So we just wore our parachutes, and then put our rigs on, pulled our trousers over the harness, so you couldn't see the harness, and we had just normal shirts and stuff. So the rig could be seen, but we wore coats. We wore these big trench coats, and there were a couple of women waiting to go up the up the Empire State Building as well. And so I just said, look, we're going to do this thing for a film, but we need you to sort of help us not get caught. And so we shuffled into the elevator, but they because we looked like Quasimodo or the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and because we had these big trench coats on, but you could see that we had a hunchback because of our rigs. And so we got these girls young women to put their arms under the coats and kind of round our back. So that was what was distorting our body shape. And so we shuffled into the elevator, and then and off we went up to the 86th floor, which is the public viewing platform. It's if you see the King Kong film, it's the bit just below. It's the topmost. It's not the highest floor, but it's the 86th floor. There's other floors you can access, but not as a civilian, not as a member of the public. And it's got a big fences, and they're with spikes kind of pointing in to stop people, because people have tried to climb. I think there've been a few suicides off it over the years. So that was a security to prevent people from climbing, from throwing themselves off and committing suicide. So that was what that was there for. And so, but I knew we could climb that. And so at the right moment, and there was a little bit of a wind on that day, just a little bit of a headwind. And I wanted to go off facing the World Trade Center, facing Lower Manhattan. And so Alistair was just, going on my command. So we just stood by the fence, and I said, I'll let you know when is the time to start climbing the fence. And so I just gave the signal. We threw off our coats, and these young women were with us, but we just threw off our coats, and then we started climbing. And as soon as we started climbing, the tannoy, the public address system started blaring, "Get off the fence, get off the fence," because they're monitoring it all the time in the security room. And and everyone's panicking, everyone's screaming. You know, there's these couple of suicide maniacs about to kill themselves, and so everyone's shouting, "Get off the fence!" And so we just climbed down the other side, and there's these kind of parapets along the front. I think there's 4 or 5 of them, I think. So I stood on one, and Alistair stood on the other, a couple away from me, and you know, he just knew he had to follow me, and so we put on our static lines because we needed as much altitude canopy time as possible, because there's nowhere to land. It's just all streets and other buildings, so there's no green fields or, you know, parks or anything. So I knew we had to land in the streets, and it was, you know, sort of rush hour, so the streets were very, very busy. It was the first thing in the morning in Manhattan, and so I just jumped off, and the canopy opened pretty quickly because it was static line, and then I cleared from in front of Alistair. So I went off, and then I started turning left and heading towards Fifth Avenue. I think the Empire State Building is on 34th Street, 34th and 5th, and then Alistair jumped off, and he opened. This is a guy who'd only done one base jump before, and not a lot of skydiving, but had complete faith in me, which is not always the most the best thing. But in this instance, I knew what I was doing. But you always check your instructor. But yeah, I'm quite reliable in challenging moments. But anyway, so he jumped off after me, and then so I'm coming into land on Fifth Avenue, and in Manhattan, how the avenues go with all the traffic, and then they stop, and then all the streets go, and just by God's grace, it was so beautiful. As I came in, I thought, wow, because there's all these cars going, there's nowhere to land. I was going to have to land in between 2 roads, but the red lights went on, and all the cars stopped, and suddenly there's this clear, beautiful area, like much bigger than a boxing ring. You know, it's the cross streets, and I just flared. Came in, did a lovely landing, but I knew that Alistair was right behind me, so I knew I had to kind of clear out the way, really quickly, because I knew he was just following me. He's very, very obedient, and certainly was able to land correctly. And my mistake was I should have collapsed my parachute, but in a way it was kind of, maybe it was all part of the big plan. But instead, I just moved forward, and because I was moving forward, my parachute stayed inflated, and it hooked on a traffic signal, and just collapsed, and I couldn't pull it down. It was hooked onto this traffic signal. Alistair came in and did a beautiful landing, picked up his canopy, and disappeared. Just ran off, because that was the briefing. I said, right, you land and you just get out of there. We just get a cab back to where we were staying, and so I thought, I'm not going to run away from my parachute. I mean, it's my rig, it's my best friend. So I kind of stayed with it, and I'm trying to pull the thing off, and then the police came. The NYPD turned up, and I'm still in touch with the NYPD, and so they detained me, and then loads of people came up, and everyone was very friendly, and everyone thought it was very cool, but everyone was very frustrated because now all the traffic was blocked, and there was lots of honking of horns. And then Alistair, very coolly, they backed up a truck, and because they wanted to know who the other guy was, the police. I said, I don't know, just some guy I met. I know some skydiver. I don't know who he is. But Alistair, they backed up a truck. And so whilst I'm being interrogated by these 2 police officers, the truck comes up and backs up, and then Alistair climbs on top of the truck, unhooks the parachute. Obviously, he'd stashed his rig away by this time, unhooks my canopy, that drops down to the road, I pick it all up, and Alistair then disappears again. So good soldier, South African Defence Force, don't let you down when things kick off. But so he came back. He could have easily just run off, but he took the risk, came back into the picture, and still helped me, and then carried on with his mission, which was to get away from the area and back to where we were staying. And so I got detained, and I got, you know, handcuffed. Well, no, I didn't get handcuffed. They put me in a police car, and I got taken to the local precinct. And the sergeant of the precinct, as we walked in, is screaming at me, you know, get cuffs on that man, get cuffs on that man. And the two guys that, you know, arrested me were very, very apologetic that they had to put handcuffs on me. And then they stuck me in a cell with this African American who was a little bit out of it. And so we're stuck in this cell together. And he said, well, what are you here for? And I just jumped off the Empire State Building with a parachute. And yeah, he couldn't believe it. He thought it was great. So that really made his day. And then I was eventually, you know, I was in there for a few hours, and then I was eventually released. And when I got out of the police station, there was a podium had been set up, and there was all this media there to talk to me, and which, you know, I wasn't expecting, but they wanted me to say something. And it became a catalyst for many, many other adventures. And then they said, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, well, you know, I've got nowhere to live, but, you know, I'm trying to kind of get back to Europe, and run out of money. So hopefully I'll find a way.